Hi, I'm Brant Menswar, and welcome to my show, Just a Moment. As a former world touring musician turned keynote speaker and author, I've experienced my share of life-altering moments that have both broken me and propelled me forward. How you leverage those moments or push through them will define your destiny. Each week on my show, I'll provide tools on how to maximize those moments, as well as interview some of the most successful entrepreneurs, entertainers, and athletes on how the power of a single moment changed their life. Join me to learn how to change what's possible for your life. It'll take just a moment. Today we'll be talking to a true Renaissance man and one of my absolute best friends on the planet, Jim Trick. Equal parts musician, magician, optician, and martial arts enthusiast, Jim is just about the best hype man you could ever hope for. He's been transforming lives on and off stage for years, but today, his story starts a little closer to home.
Hey, I'm Jim Trick, and this is my moment. I grew up 40 minutes or so north of Boston, Massachusetts, in a working class town. Fascinating, really, because our town boasts 4 golf courses that are beautiful, and also neighborhoods that are so dangerous that you wouldn't want to walk through late at night. I grew up on the good side of the tracks, but was never protected from the dark side of our town. My father had retired from a 22-year career as a Navy chief, and my mom was essentially a housewife. She had grown up in our town, and when my father proposed for the 3rd time, he had finally worn her down, and she said, "Okay, I will marry you, but when you retire from the Navy, we will live in my town with my people where I was raised." I was a silly kid, and all I ever wanted to do was be silly, be funny, have fun, make people laugh, put on a show. I wanted every single bit of attention that I could possibly get. Some things, as they say, never change, but it was, come into my room, I'm putting on a show. Let's get every kid in the neighborhood to come watch me do this magic trick. Or Mrs. Hudson lived up the street and she had a piano. And multiple times per week, I would waddle my chubby butt up to her house, and I would sit and I would play the piano for her for a half hour. I had no idea how to play the piano. And she would sit and listen, and she would say, "That's very nice, Jimmy." That was me. I always loved music and art and anything that was funny or silly. Just adored all of it.
Despite Jim's jovial nature, his upbringing had its dark sides.
Growing up, I never really felt like I had a safe place. My father was a mix of the perfect Norman Rockwell dad mixed with the adult child of an alcoholic. So my father was never much of a drinker, but he displayed any of the tendencies of an alcoholic. So my father would be at once the dad that took you for a haircut and went out for breakfast on Saturday morning, and then would be explosively angry and violent. My mom was the consistent, grounded, loving, kind, faithful, wonderful mom. But we all lived in the shadow and fear of what my father was going to be like. And so my growing up until the 8th grade was a lot of fear, a lot of bullying, violence at home. And then my dad had a stroke the summer between 7th and 8th grade. So in many respects, My upbringing changed profoundly after my dad got sick and my mom was steering the ship of the family. So I can say at once, my childhood was violent and dysfunctional and beautiful and warm and complicated.
Even through his personal pains, Jim found bits of positivity in personal pleasures.
It's funny, the things that I love now as a 54-year-old adult, I have loved my entire life. When I was really little, I was very interested in karate movies and ninja movies and Karate Kid when we were in high school. And now at 54, I practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu multiple times per week and have become a global influencer for that martial art. My brothers all two of my brothers had guitars. All of my brothers loved music. And my sister was triple threat. She could sing, dance, and act. So I grew up, so I wanted a guitar. I wanted to sing. I wanted to write songs. I was always more interested in writing songs than learning other people's songs. And to this day, I write and record music like it's breathing. It's not even something that I have to think about. There are guitars in every room in my house, and loved it as a kid, love it as an adult. My last name is Trick. I was always fascinated with Harry Houdini, always loved magic. And as an adult, I bet I do a trick for somebody every day. The things that I loved then, I still love now. And I can't imagine not continuing. There's not a lot of room for me to add more hobbies at this stage in my life. I don't even like calling them hobbies. I like calling them passionate pursuits.
With his school days done, Jim was tasked with his hardest test of all, defining his future.
The idea of getting a degree and getting a good job and getting good benefits, any kind of plan that any conventional person would have said, this is what you're supposed to do. Any thought of that has always ripped the soul out of my chest. And I think that it was in the years immediately following high school that I realized that I really could carve my own road, but I was also at the same time dealing with all of the heartbreak and damage of an abusive dad, the trauma of my father's stroke, and all of those experiences that I didn't know how to deal with. Along with the silliness, part of the performer part, I think, was to protect me and to create a little bit of a shield around me so that if I was funny on a stage or clever or funny or able to entertain, then I wouldn't get bullied and I would be protected. But the other protective force field, if you will, that I built was through compulsive overeating. So while all those kind of cool things were happening after high school, I was also profoundly numbing my feelings with food. And it was in the years immediately following high school that I realized my weight and my abuse of food, that those things were going to cause me a great deal of trouble. So the awareness that this was going to be a problem came to a head one Sunday afternoon. It was summertime, and my friends all had jobs and girlfriends, and I was sitting next to a dumpster at a KFC a couple towns over from where I lived, and I drove through the drive-through and got a family meal. I sat and I ate the entire thing by myself in that parking lot. That kind of behavior, that binge eating, that was the first time that I had done it to that extent, that willfully. And for the next 10 years, that continued. Binging, creating lies to cover up what everybody saw. I don't know. I think I have to get my thyroid checked. I think it must be something to do with my metabolism. I don't even really eat that much, all the while getting bigger and bigger. And in my head, thinking, if I ever start having health problems, then I'm sure I'll do something about it. If there's ever any chance that any woman is ever going to love me or give me the time of the day, I'm sure that I'll do something about it. And then, amazingly, those things did happen. I met a woman who was a friend of my sister's from England who was visiting her for her vacation, and we met. And she fell in love with me. I was 430 pounds, and she fell in love with me. And I thought, for sure now, good, I'll finally address this. Nope, I not only didn't address it, but I gained more weight. And then I wound up starting to have heart palpitations and atrial fibrillation and one of the worst cases of sleep apnea that our local hospital had seen in 15 years. I had these health issues and I still didn't change. And then I went and had gastric bypass surgery and I lost some weight. And by 3 years later, I had regained almost all the weight. I went from 430 pounds, had gastric bypass surgery, got down to 270 pounds, and then within 3 years was back up to 400 pounds. And I used to just spend my life beating myself up for that. I had good reason for all of that, and I didn't understand it because all of the shame and confusion and embarrassment clouded that voice, that deep internal voice. I couldn't even hear it, couldn't even have imagined that it was there, that would whisper to me, of course you're doing this. You've had a really tough life. Of course you're doing this, Jim. Of course you are. It's been really hard for you. Battered, you were bullied. You watched your father have a stroke in a train station. You had no safe place. Of course you're eating like this. And I just decided, okay, this is who I am.
Jim's journey started with a single step, literally. With just one walk in one moment of emotional urging, his outlook started to change.
I'm going to use the language that I felt like God was telling me to do something, but it wasn't like an audible voice. And God might not be the word that you want to use, but it's the word that I'm going to use. I just want you to know that I'm not trying to preach at anybody. This is my story. I woke up and I just felt like God was saying, put your sneakers on and go for a walk. And that's when everything started to change. I went on the walk and I was thinking a thought. It felt like a prayer. And that thought or prayer was, why do I know what to do, but I don't do it? And I just was walking along and I'm repeating that and then leaving room to see if there would be any kind of answer that would come to me. And I felt like what God laid on my heart in that moment was, Jim, you know what to do, but you don't do it because you make all of your choices based on your feelings. And you don't have to do that. You have a choice. It was a revelation. It felt undeniably true that I made all of my choices based on my feelings. And the fact that I didn't have to, the fact that I had a choice, that was novel. That was new information. I went home and I went on Netflix and I was looking up movies and I found a movie called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. And I just picked the title because I could relate. I was fat, I was sick, And I just knew inside that if I had continued going the way I was going, that there aren't very many morbidly obese 70-year-olds or 80-year-olds floating around. And so I went home, I watched Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. And that documentary is about a guy who came from Australia to the United States and did a juice fasting. None of his methodology really meant anything to me, but the heart of the documentary really struck me. Other people had not only felt this, but had felt this and had experienced it to the point where they would make a movie about it. When I look over the course of my life, I'm 54 years old now, and I would hold this as one of the most extraordinarily miraculous moments that I've ever experienced in my own life and story. I think it's one of the top 10 stories that I've ever heard about personal transformation, and it's mine.
While Jim's path to healing was largely self-motivated, there were certain people along the way that gave him a gentle push in the right direction.
I had made a portion of my living singing and speaking in churches for a particular subculture that I still have an affection for, but I don't actively participate in. But I had gotten to travel all over the country and got to speak and sing for groups of thousands of teenagers and hundreds of people at a time. And I loved it. I was a morbidly obese Christian musician. And the fact that they let that slide is fascinating to me and could definitely evoke a commentary on that subculture that I won't get into for our conversation here. But I was so overweight. I was drinking way too much. I would go and play churches, and I'd have a coffee cup filled with whiskey on stage with me. I play a festival in New Hampshire called Soul Fest, and their whole thing was operating from the inside out. I watched the documentary. I was still feeling low. I was feeling a little cynical. I showed up and I played my set. When you get off stage, people want to talk to you. And usually they want to talk to you about something that's going on in their life, or they want you to sign a record or a t-shirt, or get a picture or have a moment with you. I got off stage and this woman walks up to me and she said, "Hey, Jim, can I talk to you for a minute?" And I said, "Sure." And it was somebody that I had met a time or two, but I didn't really know her. Her name is Gina Blaze. And she said, "Jim," she said, "it has taken me a lot of courage to come up to you right now to talk to you. And I'm actually going to ask you to drop what you're doing and hear what I have to say." And I said, "Okay." And I'm thinking she's really going through something and she needs me now. And she looked me square in the eye and she said, "Jim, 3 weeks ago, I saw a documentary called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, and I have not been able to stop thinking about you. And this has to change." Nobody knew that 3 weeks previously I had watched the same documentary. Nobody knew the switches that were beginning to click in my heart. And nobody knew that I needed exactly this moment. What I needed more than anything in my life was for some kind of miracle where someone would step in my way and say exactly what she said. And she said, "Your weight has to change because it is keeping you from being who you are, and we need you to be who you are." I jokingly said, "Gina, who needs me to be who I are?" And she said, "The world does, Jim, the world does." I looked at her and I said, "Gina, within the next 9 months, I will have lost 100 pounds and I will be getting certified as a life coach. Within 9 months, I had lost a little over 100 pounds, and I was finishing my training through Coach Training Institute to become a coach. Now it's been over a decade that I have been walking this path and have lost a little over 200 pounds. One of my mentors used to always use this as his motto. He would say, "Truth without love is harsh, but love without truth is weak." And I believe that it was Gina Blaze's ability to deliver truth with love and love with truth that made all the difference.
James Vincent Trick, welcome to Just a Moment.
Brant Christopher Menswar, I am always enthusiastically excited to share any moment that I get to share with you, my friend.
In full disclosure, I don't know that I have a closer friend in the world, and haven't for coming up on 22 years this year. And we met actually at the festival that you had this moment at in 2003. We were hosting a stage together, and
It was a veal crate of a stage. I don't mean to say it was small, but they used to raise veal calves on the stage before we got there.
the term shit shave and shower is the amount of space that you could do, just like in those famous European hotel rooms. That was the size of this stage that we hosted together.
Brant
And
and I once played a bathroom on an airplane that was bigger than this stage.
it's true. It's true. And I think there were more people watching us. We were just talking about this off mic of how many times I've heard this story. And you're like, you've got to be tired of hearing this story. We wrote a book together that sort of talked about this story. And I never, ever get tired of hearing it. Because like I said, who gets tired of watching Rocky? Nobody gets tired of watching Rocky. We always watch Rocky when it comes on. And it's the same idea. It's that perseverance. And it's why I wanted you to be on this podcast, because beyond being someone I just adore, your message is so powerful. You are, in my opinion, the greatest speaker I have ever heard. And my ego is the size of Texas, and it takes a lot for me to say that.
I watched you get better than me. So I watched you get better than me.
That's debatable. I love to watch you connect with people, because you have this ability to say anything you want and people don't get offended. And that is a magic trick that I wish I could learn. I'm still working on it.
I hope you never get there. I hope you never get there.
I think we both, in a lot of ways, are Renaissance men of this era, where we sing and we perform and we speak, and we both had our church stints. And honestly, you and I were ordained together. The idea of your moment is one that I think we all struggle with. I think with the explosion of GLP-1 drugs and all of these weight loss drugs, of people starting to find other new, healthier ways to give them a little edge that isn't major surgery. All of these things are helping. And so I think it's so important that people heard that moment and understand you had moments in the past and you did things to improve your life, but they didn't stick because your mindset never changed. And it wasn't until you decided to change that mindset that you started to see sustainable success, that you've been able to continue to keep the weight off 13 years later. Would you agree that's the case?
100%. And we live in a culture where we're way more interested in symbolism over substance. And in this case, the symbolism is very simply treating the symptoms, right? Take the shot to get smaller without ever sitting with the question, why am I overeating to begin with? If you're somebody who is compulsively eating refined sugar, or you're somebody who is, whatever the behavior is There's a reason for the behavior. Now, the mindset change is the moment when one chooses to go beyond the symptom and examine the root cause. And in this case, and in the case for many people in similar situations, the fucking root cause is painful. And as Tony Robbins would tell you, we are programmed to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So the bad news is if all you're doing is addressing the symptom but not the root cause, the damage is going to continue. But if a person is willing to mindset shift, that shift is when you say, yes, this is a painful, scary thing to look at and sit with, and I'm going to do it.
Talking about painful moments, let's talk about a moment you wished you could get back.
For somebody who felt so unloved for so much of my life, and at different points in my life, I was just a bottomless cavern. You could pour as much love into it, and I just wouldn't receive it. One of the kindest, most creative things that anybody ever did to try to help me was when I was really in that mode in my early 20s, when I was just really getting into a problem with binge eating and my weight. A woman who was a friend who would go on to marry one of my best friends at the time, Claudia Sapienza, gave me a gift of a book. And the book was The Little Engine Who Could. And in the back of the book, she wrote, I know you can. And she had taped a gift certificate to a membership at a gym. And I was moved and I was offended and I went once and I did nothing about it. If I had been able to receive that as a generous, kind, thoughtful, creative act of transformative love, who knows what my 20s might have been like. If I'm looking for a moment that I wish I could have back, that's quite a moment. But I don't live with regrets. I love how this story is unfolding.
Tell me this. What would you say to a 20-something-year-old now struggling with their weight in the same scenarios that you found yourself in? What would be the advice you'd give to them today?
I think everybody could have a therapist, right? I think everybody could, but that's like a generic piece of advice. And I'm not a mental health professional, but given my own story, I've had the opportunity to talk with hundreds of people. And so I would begin with the idea of anybody that is engaging in compulsive behavior that they wish they were not engaging in. I would begin with saying that there's probably a really important, legitimate reason for what they're doing and for where they have gotten to. My dear friend Laura wrote a book about her path to getting sober. It's called We Are the Luckiest. Her name is Laura McCowan. She's one of my close friends. And she wrote what it's a manifesto of sorts that she refers to as the 9 things. This is her 9 things. This is to the any year old, but really to the 20-year-old because they're so young and they really have the opportunity to just not waste a lot of time. I would say these 9 things. I would say, number one, it's not your fault. Number two, it is your responsibility. It's a huge one for me, taking responsibility. Just stop blaming other people, right? It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. It's unfair that this is your thing. But number four is this is your thing. This will never stop being your thing until you face it. You cannot do it alone. Only you can do it. I love you, and I will never stop reminding you of these things. It's not your fault. It is your responsibility. It's unfair that this is your thing. This is your thing. It will never stop being your thing until you face it. You can't do it alone. Only you can do it. I love you, and I will never stop reminding you of these things.
It's incredible. It's incredible. If people want to continue to follow your journey, what's the best way for them to do that online?
You can follow me at my white belt on Instagram, which is this is a weird turn. The martial art practice of Brazilian jiu-jitsu has been transformative for me in that it has connected me to my body in a way that I never ever thought possible. And so I teach beginner Brazilian jiu-jitsu to adults, and I have a platform and a podcast around jujitsu. And a lot of what I share at my white belt has to do with beginner's mind and sticking to things that are difficult. But anybody that wants to just reach out to me or follow me or be involved in my mix and what I'm about, that's where I'm spending most of my public facing life these days. At my white belt on Instagram, my white belt wherever fine podcasts are listened to, and mywhitebelt.com for all of it.
Bud, I love you. I
Love
can't
you.
thank you enough for spending the time here and helping everybody with your story. And I'm counting down the days to see each other again. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Just a Moment. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast and tell a friend or two about it to help spread the word so everyone can find a moment that inspires them. Don't forget to leave us a review and check us out on the web at justamomentpodcast.com. Just a Moment is produced by Natalie Von Rose and Brant Menswar. For more inspiring shows like this, visit surroundpodcasts.com.